In what ways are you like a mirror for your partner? And in what ways are they like a mirror to you? And technically, we are all mirrors to each other just about all of the time, if you really think about it. But in a romantic relationship, this is a really heightened opportunity to be a mirror for each other. Why is this great and difficult at the same time? Because sometimes mirrors show us things that are a little uncomfortable to see about ourselves. And a mirror is something that you just walk in front of and it shows you yourself without you even asking. And if it's a really good mirror, if it's nice and clean and wiped off, then it will show you an accurate version of the way that you look, literally speaking. Metaphorically speaking, our partners and the other people in our lives are never a perfect mirror. They will never show you yourself without a little bit of bias, a little bit of lack of clarity in some areas because they may not know you in a complete and full way. We can never be completely and fully known, right? Or they may not have access to certain information about you that makes you you. And so they may not be able to see the whole picture, but at the very least, they can reflect back to you the way that you are in that moment, just that moment, not the past, not the present, or not the past and the future necessarily, but just what they see in that moment. And this is so valuable because being in ourselves and our bodies and our minds, we can't see the forest for the trees so often. And it's really hard to have that meta layer of recognizing yourself and self-awareness without some external input. And so you can be a mirror for your partner and them to you, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally, sometimes directly, like where you are speaking about it in the moment, and sometimes indirectly. So for example, an indirect version would be if I was in an argument with my partner and I was getting very agitated and maybe speaking a little louder or quickly, and if I look on his face and he has this sort of pained expression on his face, like he is not liking my self-presentation in that moment, that's a reflection about who I'm being in that moment and the way that I'm coming across. And I can, if I'm aware enough in the moment and not just flooded by emotion in that argument, I can be like, oh, I am not having the best impact right now. My words are not coming across the best way because I can see it in someone else. And then a more direct version is when your partner observes something about you that you couldn't see about yourself. So for example, if my room is really messy and my partner comes over and is like, hey, I noticed you haven't cleaned your room in a while. I know this is something you do when you're like in a depressive episode. Is that maybe something that's going on for you right now? And I can be like, oh yeah, I've been really checking out of my life lately and feeling very disconnected and unmotivated. And yeah, that's probably a big reason why I haven't cleaned my room. And so I may not think conscientiously about those things or any internal process I may be having until somebody reflects it back to me. And it's great to ask it in the form of like an observation and a question, or at least an observation and then a question that asks for confirmation. Your partner doesn't need to draw any conclusions about you. They just need to reflect what they see, right? And then they can ask, does that ring true for you? Is that something that might be going on for you? How do you feel about that? And you can choose to reject it if it doesn't feel true for you. You can say, no, it doesn't really feel like what's going on for me, but thanks for calling that to my attention. And like, it's something to analyze now. It's been brought to the surface. So at the very least, they've brought something forward that you can now address consciously. And being a mirror for each other is something you can trade off doing. And for example, just last night, I was talking to my partner about I was giving some support and some reflection about some negative self-talk that he'd been having for himself and some difficulty and struggle that he'd been going through lately about a topic. And he thanked me for my perspective and was like, hey, that's a really good perspective. And I was like, yeah, I should take my own advice more often, actually, because in that moment of reflecting for him, I realized that I was able to see myself in a new light and see the ways that we experience this particular struggle in similar ways. Like, maybe the reason I am seeing this clearly for you is because I've been in your shoes before. I've had that exact experience myself. So maybe I should replay this back at myself, the things I'm saying to you now, because it would be super helpful. So cultivating the act of being a mirror for each other can be a super healthy thing in terms of personal development and self-awareness, but also the connectedness and tight bond and the depth of your bond that you can have in a romantic relationship. So you can sit down and attempt to do this consciously with your partner. For example, saying, hey, I really want to work on this skill with you of being mirrors for each other. Are you willing to dive in and try that with me? And if so, what might that look like? In what ways does this excite you? In what ways does it maybe make you hesitant or nervous? How can we soften the blow when we observe something a little difficult about each other? Because that's when it becomes a pill that's hard to swallow, right? But at least there's somebody there who can do that for you in your life. If you are consenting to it, if you are open to it, if you see the value and you're willing to work through some difficult things when they're brought to your attention. So like anything else, this is a skill that can be learned, and it helps if you do it with intention and talk about, hey, so can I call you out on certain things? Or, I have this really bad tendency. I would appreciate it if you could let me know when I'm doing it, or ask me questions about why I'm doing that in the moment so that I can work on myself and try not to do those things. So figure out ways that you and your partner can observe each other in ways that help each other grow, become more self-aware, and do so with compassion and understanding so that it does not come with judgment, right? Mirrors don't judge, they just show you. So for more relationship dynamic things like this, please check out my podcast called Head Over Feels.